All right, today we're going to talk about the integumentary system, or the skin. So the integumentary system includes the skin, and then it's got some accessory structures that are going to be included in there, like your hair, nails, and glands. There's also blood vessels, muscles, and nerves that are going to be part of your skin. So the specialty that is going to study the skin, diagnosis and treatment of disorders of the skin, and anything to do with the integumentary system is dermatology. So your skin is a cutaneous membrane that's going to cover the entire body. It's the largest organ of the body when you look at the body's surface area and the weight. So it takes up about 2 square meters or 22 square feet, and it weighs between 4.5 and 5 kilograms or 10 to 11 pounds. So it's about 16% of the body weight. It ranges from 0.5 to 4 millimeters thick. So if you're just trying to picture that with standard units, 2.54 centimeters is 1 inch. So there are places where the skin can be 4 millimeters is almost half a centimeter. So it's thinnest on the eyes, it's thickest on the heels, and on average the thickness is 1 to 2 millimeters. So functions, it's going to cover and protect the body. It's going to protect you from pathogens. Most of them are not going to penetrate through the skin. Some will. It helps to protect you from injury. It's going to help protect the underlying structures from ultraviolet radiation. It's going to be the first step in vitamin D synthesis as well. Helps to regulate body temperature. So when you are sweating, that's one way of your body working to regulate the temperature. You can also dilate and constrict the blood vessels that go to the skin. If you dilate them, the blood is closer to the surface of the skin. That helps to cool you off. If you constrict them, it pulls it towards the core of the body to keep you warmer. Goosebumps, the purpose of those is they actually will help to lift the hair, and that little hairs sticking up can have a little barrier of air underneath that can warm up. It works the same way like a down blanket or a down coat would. So it's part of the homeothermic mechanism to be able to maintain an internal stable body temperature. So frostbite is freezing of the skin and the underlying tissues. So your subcutaneous adipose tissue will increase the insulation. So functions of the skin, it's going to excrete waste. So that would be things like urea in your sweat. It's going to help to reduce water loss. Somebody who has a burn where skin has actually been removed, one of the big risks is dehydration. So other things, it's going to have sensory receptors for cutaneous sensation, as well as mechanoreception to tell when things move. You have some that are actually going to be connected to chemical receptors for taste and smell. The skin's going to have 2 major layers. The outer thinner layer is the epidermis. It's going to be made up of epithelial cells. The inner thicker layer is the dermis. And then below that is the subcutaneous layer, or hypodermis, which is not actually considered to be part of the skin, but it attaches the skin to the underlying tissues and organs. So here's a nice picture of the skin. And you can see you've got epidermis, dermis, and then the subcutaneous or hypodermis down here. This is a slide that's a cross-section of skin. So you can see here the dermal papillae in the skin. So looking at the epidermis, it's stratified squamous epithelium. There's no blood vessels to it. It's got 4 types of cells and 5 distinct strata or layers. Most of the cells here are keratinocytes, about 90% of them, that produce keratin, which is a tough fibrous protein to provide protection. So your keratinocytes, 90%, produce keratin. Melanocytes are about 8%. They produce melanin pigment. It can be transferred to other cells with long cell processes. The Langerhans cells are going to be immune cells that are going to come from the bone marrow. And then the Merkel cells are in the deepest layer. These are going to be used for touch receptors and connected to sensory neurons. So the epidermis is melanocytes producing that dark brown pigment melanin. It's going to help to protect the skin from UV radiation. So here you can see some of the melanocytes in there. And this is also going to allow you to see different layers of the epidermis here. So you can see there stratum basale, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, and stratum corneum, and then in a slide photograph as well. So the epidermis, I have 4 layers in thin skin, 5 layers in the thick skin. The stratum basale is the deepest. It's sometimes called the stratum germinativum. You have continuous cell division here that's going to produce all of the other layers. So as you produce more cells, they're going to grow up and push up towards the surface. Stratum spinosum is 8 to 10 layers of keratinocytes. The stratum granulosum is going to have keratohyalin and lamellar granules. The stratum granulosum is where the cells are actually going to start to die. The stratum lucidum is present only in thick skin, or at least is a lot more abundant in the thick skin, so toe pads, finger pads, palms, and soles. Then the stratum corneum is going to be many sublayers of flat dead keratinocytes called corneocytes or squames. These are continually shed off and replaced by cells from the deeper strata. So when these are shed off, they do make up the bulk of your house dust. So when you'll see dust sitting around your house, it's the stratum corneum from you and your family members and your pets. It actually will make up a good portion of your mattress and your pillow as well. So it's not really a pleasant thought to think about when you go and stay at a hotel where it's all kinds of people's stratum corneum. When you have a lot of friction, it will stimulate formation of a callus. You're just going to produce some extra layers there. So the esophagus is stratified squamous epithelium, but it's not keratinized because it's not normally exposed to dryness and abrasion. So it's not with your hands. If you think about it, you can grab pine cones with your hands. They're meant to deal with the abrasion of something like that. If you imagine swallowing a pine cone, not really pleasant. The esophagus isn't meant to deal with that kind of thing. Keratinization is the accumulation of more and more protective keratin, and that will occur as the cells move from the deepest layer to the surface layer. Dandruff is an excess of keratinized cells that are being shed from the scalp. So this lets you compare the difference in thick skin and thin skin. So your dermis is a connective tissue layer that's composed of collagen and elastic fibers, fibroblasts, macrophages, and fat cells. Here's where you're going to have the hair follicles, the glands, the nerves, and blood vessels. So there's 2 major regions. The papillary region is more superficial, and then the reticular region is deeper. So your papillary region will have loose connective tissue and elastic fibers. The little finger-like projections in there that you can see on this picture here are the dermal papillae. This section is going to adhere the epidermis to the dermis. It will have capillaries that feed the epidermis, and Meissner's corpuscles for touch and free nerve endings for pain and temperature. The deeper reticular region is going to have dense irregular connective tissue. This is what gives skin its strength. It's going to have interlacing collagen and elastic fibers. It will have oil glands, sweat gland, ducts, fat, and hair follicles. It's going to give strength, extensibility, and elasticity to the skin. When you see stretch marks, it's actually dermal tears from extreme stretching. And then you'll have the Pacinian corpuscles that are going to sense pressure and vibration. So lines of cleavage are tension lines in the skin. That will indicate the predominant direction of the underlying collagen fibers. Your epidermal ridges are going to reflect the contours of the underlying dermal papillae. This is what's going to create your fingerprints or toe prints if you look at the skin on your toes. It's going to help to increase the firmness of the grip because it will give you friction. Dermatoglyphics is the study of the pattern of the epidermal ridges. So here you can see fingerprints, and this is what it would look like underneath the skin, microscopic layers. So there's 3 pigments that are going to contribute to skin color. So not everybody, it's not that we're just different shades of brown. Melanin is going to give yellow to reddish brown to almost black pigment. This is responsible for the darker skin colors. When you have freckles or pigmented moles, these are going to be local accumulations of melanin. You're also going to have keratin that will give yellow to orange pigment in the skin. This is usually more obvious in the palms and the soles of the feet. So when you look at the color of them, they will sometimes look more yellow or orange. And then hemoglobin, that's going to be circulating in your blood underneath, is going to be a reddish pigment that's going to be responsible for the pinkish hue of the skin. So here you can see the different types of cells. You can see the melanocyte and the melanin pigment. So here is a cross-section of the epidermis of the skin, looking at those different layers, the melanocytes. So no, people do not have more melanocytes than others. Sometimes they will just be more active in some people and closer to the surface. So sometimes people wonder, with eating the carrots, can you turn yourself orange? Yes, I like carrots, but I can't imagine wanting to eat that many carrots. It's not that we've had that many people do this to really study it. It does not appear to be harmful, other than you're going to look orangish, and if you stop eating the carrots, the excess pigment will go away. So your subcutaneous layer or hypodermis is not part of the skin, but it is going to attach the skin to the underlying layers, and you'll have the lamellated Pacinian corpuscles. Those will detect external pressure as well as vibration applied to the skin. Accessory structures, these are going to include hair, skin glands, and nails. Your hairs have an important function. They are going to provide some protection. They help in the reduction of heat loss and sensing light touch. So you can imagine where you've been sitting there and something just grazes your arm, the hair on your arms, and you feel it. And you're like, oh, something just got really close there. That's the light touch that you can have through the hair. Most of us don't have enough body hair that it's a significant source of warmth. So hair is made up of dead keratinized epidermal cells. You're going to have the shaft, which is going to mostly project above the surface of the skin. The root is going to penetrate into the epidermis. The hair follicle that's going to be around it, the epithelial root sheath, and the dermal root sheath. So hair prevents heat loss. It will decrease sunburn. So it does take a fair amount to do that. I have fair-colored hair myself, so it does not do a great job of decreasing sunburn on the scalp. Darker, thicker hair is more effective for that. Eyelashes help to protect the eyes. And then you've got the hair root plexuses that will sense light touch when the hair is moved. So here you can see some examples of a hair. Shaving does not cause more hair growth. What you would do when you shave is you actually cut the hair and you have a blunt edge on it at the thickest part. So it makes the hair feel like it's thicker, but it's not. When you just let a hair grow out naturally, it will have a tapered end that will make it softer. This is showing microscopic portions of the hair with the follicle underneath the skin. So occasionally if you pull a hair out that is still a relatively young hair, you can pull some of the follicle with it and see it on the end. So showing cross sections of the hair. Hair comes in different colors and textures. There are different types of hairs, including lanugo, vellus hairs, and terminal hairs. Your hair color is determined by the amount of melanin. And then with sebaceous glands or oil glands, these are going to be connected to the hair follicles. So sebaceous glands are going to secrete an oily substance called sebum that helps to prevent the hair and skin from drying out. It also has proteins in it that can help inhibit the growth of certain bacteria. It's not going to prevent growth of all bacteria. It's more that it will keep the population in check. So here you can see a sebaceous gland that's going to go into a hair follicle here. And then showing some underneath the microscope. So sudoriferous glands. So you do have numerous eccrine or merocrine sweat glands that are going to help to cool the body by evaporating. They also help to eliminate a small amount of waste. So when the sweat evaporates, the molecules move, they take their energy with it, and it leaves the surface behind a little bit cooler. If you're in a really humid environment, things aren't as apt to evaporate, so your sweat isn't as effective at cooling you. Apocrine sweat glands are mostly in the skin of the axilla, groin, the areola, bearded facial regions of adult males. These excretory ducts are going to open into hair follicles. This is secreted during emotional stress and sexual excitement. This type of sweat has more protein in it and more odor. So you are most likely to release this and have the odor that goes with it when you least likely want the odor. The odor is not the same thing as a pheromone. This generally is not going to attract people to you. Ceruminous glands, along with the nearby sebaceous glands, are going to produce earwax. And that provides a sticky barrier that's going to prevent the entry of foreign bodies into the ear canal. So as a kid, you may have tried earwax and realized it's not real tasty stuff. It also helps to repel insects from wanting to walk in there. The human ear would be a really inviting place to hang out. It's warm, it's sheltered from the environment. You got dead stuff, dead skin to eat. So an insect would probably like that. This just makes it a little less inviting. And then we have mammary glands that secrete milk. So breast milk is a modified form of sweat. Yummy. Nails are composed of hard keratinized epidermal cells. They're going to be on the dorsal surface of the ends of the fingers and toes. So the nail will have a free edge, and then you have the transparent nail body or plate, and then the whitish lunula at the base. And then the nail root is actually embedded back in a fold of skin. So you can see those things here, and you can see the nail root goes back a ways underneath. So here's looking at a picture of epidermal wound healing. So here you've got these dividing cells that are going to help to fill in this detached enlarged basal epithelium and migrate across the wound. With deep wound healing, you have to heal the vessels underneath as well. So you would have the clot that would be in there. You're going to involve blood clotting in the process of deeper wound healing, where superficial wounds is basically the cells just growing back together over the top. So you've got an inflammatory phase in there, bringing more vessels to the area, and then a maturation phase where the blood vessel is actually restored and the fibroblasts have made some scar tissue. So your epidermis is going to develop from the ectoderm tissue. It's going to include nails, hair, the skin glands, all of it. The epidermis of the fetus is protected by a fatty substance called the vernix caseosa. So it almost looks like a white type of layer over the outside of the baby. It does help to provide some protection to the baby as well from bacteria when it first comes out. So the dermis is going to develop from the mesoderm. So this just shows skin developing as you go along in fetal development. So aging, this is not nice to the skin. You get wrinkling, you have a decrease in the skin's immune responsiveness, dehydration and cracking of the skin, decreased sweat production, decreased numbers of functional melanocytes, and that will result in gray hairs and atypical skin pigmentation. A loss of subcutaneous fat. So you may think, well, get rid of the fat. That's a good thing. It actually makes the skin on the face look like things are more sunken in. There's a general decrease in skin thickness. There's an increased susceptibility to pathological condition. Growth of hair and nails decreases. The nails also may become more brittle with age. So with skin cancers, The one down at the bottom is what you would typically think of a skin cancer looking like. Not all of them look that way. So some of them can look like a crusty sore that doesn't go away. Others can be more lumpy. So basal cell carcinoma is the least malignant, the most common. Squamous cell carcinoma is going to involve the keratinocytes in the stratum spinosum. That one has a little bit more variable metastatic tendency. It tends to occur more in males than females. Melanoma is the worst one, and it will tend to metastasize rapidly. Fortunately, it's only about 2% of skin cancers. So here is showing some comparisons of the pictures of them. Anything with skin cancers, they generally will remove the spot or biopsy it and look at it underneath the microscope to determine the stage and what type it is. So if you're interested in these, if you look at the Derm Atlas online, it has actually over 10,000 dermatology images of all kinds of things on all sorts of body parts. So there are some really graphic images in there. If you enjoy that kind of thing or like to share them with other people, it's a good website to go to and look at those. But you can see the variation in what skin cancers can look like. Bed sores or pressure sores are caused by sustained pressure. So it's often in beds or in a wheelchair when somebody is not able to get up and move around. And what happens is with the pressure on there, you get reduced circulation. UV radiation is important. It's needed for vitamin D production, so it's the first step. The melanin is produced in response to UV light, but UV light can also damage the skin and the DNA. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. We do need to have UV light. You just don't want to have too much of it. So the recommendation is generally to get your UV exposure in the morning before 10 a.m. or in the afternoon after 3 p.m. so that you don't have the same intensity of rays causing as much damage to your skin. With burns, they're classified on the severity. So first degree is mostly superficial. With these, you can have redness. It can be from chemicals, radiation, heat. You can have UV light cause these. Second degree burns are deeper. Here you're going to have blisters due to the damage to the tissue below. The skin is no longer waterproof so much, it allows some of the fluid to leak through, and that's what causes the blister. That can also be from any of the above types of sources. Third degree burns are the deepest. The skin's actually destroyed. You have a loss of sensation in that area. It doesn't mean these are a pain-free type of injury. They can actually be very painful. Some of the tissue around it may be in various stages up to third degree, which will be very sensitive. As you start to have things grow back and heal in there, you will have nerve fibers in there with not a lot of protection. You can have third degree burns occur from the sun. So there is a risk due to dead tissue and infections. Anaerobic infections really like dead tissue as well as fungal infections. Also dehydration. Severity will depend on the parts of the body being burned. So sunburns can occur in people of all skin pigmentations. A lot of times people think it is just pale people. Pale people are going to sunburn easier, but you can also have sunburns in the darkest of skin. You just can't see it, but they can certainly feel the burn underneath. So when I look at skin and tissue repair, phase 1, hemostasis. This is at the onset of injury. The goal is to stop the bleeding. So the body's going to activate the blood clotting system to block the drain. Platelets come into contact with collagen, and then they will start to aggregate. Thrombin is going to initiate the formation of fibrin to make a mesh, almost like a spider web, and form from fibroblasts. This is going to help strengthen the platelet clumps. In phase 2, you've got the defensive or inflammatory phase. This is going to focus on destroying bacteria and removing debris if they're present. Neutrophils will enter the wound to destroy the bacteria. They'll help remove debris. This is going to peak between 24 and 48 hours after injury. After about 3 days, this will reduce quite a bit. The macrophages are going to arrive to clear the debris. They'll secrete growth factors and proteins that will attract immune cells to the wound to help facilitate tissue repair. So this will occur in 4 to 6 days. This is often associated with edema, erythema, heat, and pain. So you have the swelling, heat, redness, altered movement, and pain. The altered movement doesn't come into play as much here. Phase 3 is the proliferative phase. The goal is to fill in and cover the wound. So first you're going to fill the wound. You have deep red granulation tissue that's going to start to fill the wound bed with connective tissue. You'll make new blood vessels. Next will be contraction of the wound. So the margins are actually going to get pulled towards the center of the wound here. It's almost like having little stitches in there that are going to pull things towards the middle. 3 is covering the wound. The epithelial cells will arise from the wound bed or margins, and they're going to start to migrate across the wound bed, doing epithelialization. This will last 4 to 24 days. In phase 4, the maturation phase, here the new tissue is going to gain strength and flexibility. You're going to have the collagen fibers reorganize, the tissue remodels and matures, and is going to increase in tensile strength. This is when you see that initial scar start to look a little bit more like normal tissue. So the increased strength, it will be about a maximum of 80% of the pre-injured strength. So the length of this can vary from 21 days to 2 years. So if you have a scar, it actually has a couple years to really improve the tissue quality in there. Necrosis is death of tissue. Pus is a thick yellowish or greenish opaque liquid. This is going to come from the infected tissue. It's made up of the dead white blood cells and the bacteria with the debris and serum. Abscesses are confined pockets of pus in the tissue. So when we look at fibrosis versus regeneration, a regenerative phase is going to occur where you have the injured cells be replaced by cells of the same type. It leaves no lasting evidence of damage. And a phase known as fibrosis or fibroplasia is going to have connective tissue replace normal parenchymal tissue. So the idea of scar tissue is to get new tissue down as fast as possible. It's less functional, it's more pain sensitive, and it's more likely to re-injure. So it's helpful to do things to improve this quality of the scar tissue.